All right, so we are live. Beautiful. So I'll start. I didn't tell the panel that I was going to do this, but I'll start with a dad joke because I always have my kids do it, and then they just are like, teachers in general. So what do you call a teacher who forgot to take attendance? And you all on the panel can answer too if you want. What do you call a teacher who forgot to take attendance?
A retired teacher?
Or soon to be retired. Yeah. Absent-minded. Close. Absent-minded. Yeah, that's my dad joke to start off. So welcome to the round table this morning. It is February 3rd at 10:45. Heather just posted that. That's impressive, Heather. 10:45 a.m. Central, 11:45 Eastern, and early on the West Coast. So thank you so much for everyone in attendance. The point I was sharing this with the panel too, and I've been coordinating this with them. They've been so gracious, and I'm very thankful for all of them. I'll introduce them in a second. But the point of this roundtable is I wanted to create, and Conover in general, we wanted to create a space to get like-minded educators together to discuss the topics that sometimes don't get the time they should. Sometimes we don't have the space, right? We're busy putting out fires. A lot of times there's such a focus on certain programs or initiatives or strategic planning. And especially in the world of education, sometimes there's litigation, surrounding that. So there's not a space a lot of times to have this kind of opportunity to just have a genuine discussion. So we wanted to do that today, to get together, talk about best practices, have a little fun. It's Friday, right in the winter. We were joking here in the Midwest. It's a little bit cold, but just to kind of learn from these educators, these veterans, that some of the mistakes they've made, also some of the successes of why they've been around so long too, helping kids with disabilities be successful out in the world. So with that, I'm just going to kind of introduce them. Ladies first. Mary Ann has worked many roles. She's currently in Virginia working at a counseling center called Peace of Mind Counseling. They serve Richmond, Chesterfield, Midlothian, and the surrounding counties in Virginia. But she's had many roles within special education. She's worked as a vocational evaluator in Virginia. She's worked on an Indian reservation in Arizona, helping out some students over there. And now she's where she is now, back in Virginia, doing counseling and she's the director of education at the counseling center. So welcome, Mary Ann, and thank you so much for your time. Terry and Saul, I introduce them together. They work together. I've never talked to them in depth, but via email, I can tell they're real good friends just because they give each other a hard time. So that's fun to see. But Terry Breitbach is a teacher and work coordinator for the School to Work program in Dubuque County Community Schools, and so is Chris Sully, which, by the way, one of my best friends from college is a Sullivan, so we call him Sully too. So that just comes naturally to me. But Terry has worked in education for 34 years, and right, and then Chris, Sully's been for 23, helping students with disabilities. They do it all, right? Researching job opportunities, complete job applications, interviewing, participating in paid, non-paid work sites, and then obviously supply them with some coaching assistance along the way too. So Terry and Sully, welcome from Dubuque. So, which is a little bit colder than Michigan and Wisconsin here. And Michigan, that's the next person, George. George Manson's joining us from Leslie High School in Leslie, Michigan, just south of Lansing. He's been a special educator for, gosh, what, you only look, 25, George? So, I mean.
God bless you. Thank you. This is year 37.
So he's been working for 37 years in special education, helping students, all variety of ability levels at Leslie High School. So welcome, George, from Michigan. And last but definitely not least, Zach. Zach Burson joins us from Bossier Parish. He is, out of all of us, well, maybe Marianne, but a little warmer. He's in the 60s today and just north of Shreveport. He's in Benton, Louisiana. He's the transition and mentoring coordinator there for students and works in high school and also the post-high school program. And he's taken, again, all of these people have taken time out of their day. They're gracious to kind of jump in here. So really appreciate all of you. So thank you guys so much. Anything I missed from the panelists before I jump in?
Yeah, I got to say something, Art.
You knew I would. But I got all these guys beat. This is year 50 for me.
Wow.
Wow.
Kudos.
Yeah,
Well, hey, you're the lady. I didn't want to,
I
say
know,
anything.
but
Yeah.
I know. I just had to say, you even bring in the elders, huh? So thank you. Glad to be a
Well,
part of it.
no, I'm glad. And I was sharing with them. We jumped on a few minutes early here before we went live, and I was just sharing that. Again, we don't have this space, but also, there's this tribal knowledge that's out there for veterans that are teaching that, us newbies, right, myself included, I'm always learning. But Marianne was even saying she's always learning. I mean, she was in education in that space, and now she's in the counseling side of things, still doing education. But one of the things she was mentioning was she's found it very difficult to when she was teaching or in the education world, there's certain things you have to do, right? Education wise, you have to have these standards met. You have to have state tests coming up. You got all this. So if a student had some baggage that was there, a lot of times you couldn't dig as deep as you could or needed to because of the fact that you got these kids in front of you in a class and you got curriculum you got to cover. And it's the unfortunate part of the game. And so she said that right now she thankfully has the space to, dig with students should they need it, some extra counseling or additional things. So why don't we just start there? I mean, as part of this discussion is, how can you, or how have you fostered that environment of collaboration among students and then helping them with that mental health side of things? And we could even go into see where this conversation goes with COVID in general, because that had 2 years of that with students and everybody in the world. So, how are you seeing that? How are you creating that environment? Marianne, if you want to speak first with your counseling side of things, and then I'll jump in a roundabout way here with the educator side of things.
Sure. Thank you. I guess for me, the number one thing is to help people realize that they matter and that they have a voice. And I want to hear what they have to say. So even doing things virtually, I try really hard to deliberately select certain groups that kids would be put into. I would be responsible for that. I would also try really hard to set some classroom rules, but I let the students be part of that. So if I'm working virtually, I'm very open to what the rule could be, but I want to be sure that everybody's in agreement with it. I always try to make my goals clear, my expectations, things that I want students to do. And then I evaluate on their merit. And that's hard for teachers sometimes because we have to be very strict, but I do not have a hard time saying for a kid, you only have to do 5 problems to show me that you understand what it is that I need you to do. So that's been key for me. As far as parents, I try to be very considerate of their cultural background. I want to get as close to them as I possibly can, find out what their needs are. And the more I understand, the more I'm able to have a mutual respect between them and myself. And I try to use multiple means of communication, the phone, emails, whatever, works best. And that's hard sometimes, especially if they don't have a phone or they don't have a computer and do not sometimes understand English. I find myself having to have people interpret. And then for my colleagues, I'm very much a social person. My passion's still here. I love sharing it. I love helping new teachers realize that you're in this for a reason and don't leave us, give us a chance. And I'm all about self-care, and I love to have lunch with teachers. I think it's the best time in the world to sit around the table and enjoy each other's accomplishments. And I always look for that you can celebrate someone else's accomplishments. And I was joking, I do have the 50 years, but I'm not patting myself on the back with that. The point is that I have so many people I could lift up right now to tell you who got me to this place. And I think the reason I'm still in it and still enjoy it is because of that I've recognized that other people have made just significant benefits to education. And I just, I try really hard to to bring out the best in all people. And so that's it for me for collaboration. But
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, George, why don't you jump in next? Is that you two? You have some people to lean on that have kind of supported you along the way too. Is that
Absolutely? Well, that's a tough act to follow there. I use some of the same tactics, and I love the self-advocacy piece because I think that's such a big part of what we do with young people to help them learn how to advocate for themselves. So when they move into post-high school options, they have prepared themselves to go after their goals that they've set. And hopefully goal setting piece is a big part of that. I've always tried to build relationships with the staff. I'm grateful because of my bombastic background. I had a chance to work for our local community mental health agency for 5 years, kind of on a weekend gig, to get to know more in that area. And I'm grateful to do that because they're a community partner that we need a lot to come to the table when it's time to make those transition decisions. And then, of course, our counseling staff at the school. I've also been very blessed along the way in my career to wear a couple of other hats in the school. I coached a couple of sports for many, many years. And what it allows me to do is get the community involved and let them know what we're doing and get my students opportunities to become involved with the community or other aspects of the school. I've been very fortunate to have those options for them.
awesome? Sully, how about you?
Kind of bringing off of as far as what George and Marianne, obviously the biggest thing that I believe is just building a relationship with the student and the parents. Terry and I are kind of specialized because we're work experience coordinators in a district that values hoping to find jobs for our special ed population in the district. That's been kind of I don't know, I wouldn't say that it's, I don't think all the districts do it, obviously. I mean, I think Terry and I are very thankful that we have these positions to be able to help kiddos find jobs when they're in school, and also to help them as far as to find something that's in their interest area after high school. But I kind of agree with George and Marianne that the number one thing that you have to do as an educator is build a relationship with that student so that they will be able to feel comfortable to open up to them, so that you can kind of figure out what's going on with them and to find their interest area and, find employment out in the community for them.
How, Terry, piggybacking off of that, as you build relationships with kids, how do you do that? How do you find the time to do that? Right? Because the one thing I've been hearing especially the last year, but 3, 4, 5 years, is just the caseloads are bigger. There's more stressors. Like I said, obviously with COVID and all that. So how do you do that? How do you build? Because I agree, right? And I feel that too, and I've heard that. So how do you do that though? How do you find the time to individualize that for every kid? Because, right, you're putting out fires, you got stuff. So
right.
Speak to that a little bit.
Well, as Chris said, we're fortunate to be in a district that's really put an emphasis on making connections, but also doing career planning and career job sites with students, and has freed Chris and I up that we no longer have, let's say, tied to a classroom where we're teaching in classrooms, that we have a caseload to do IEPs for. We are working all day and are given 2 job coaches that we work with students, whether it's at night, on weekends, or during the school day, to work on those work goals or work interests. And when you do that, you start to see a different side of a student, not tied to in the building with peers, but out with adults in at a work site. We supply a lot of the transportation when we're driving students to and from work, and you're able to get those conversations away from peers with them. And you start seeing a different side of that student. And I mean, we all work with probably difficult students at times, but when you get them out of that school setting and into the real world where they start to connect and plug in, it helps us understand a different side of that student. And then those students maybe to see a different side of us as a teacher, not just an educator in a building. The other thing for myself that, I've heard the panelists say too, how do you find that? Well, I remember when I first started, there's always that teacher or teachers in the building where the kids figure it out, that they're the ones that they go to go see, that they're the ones there in the morning with them, and talking about what'd you do over the weekend. They're maybe stopping in for a pop or a snack or something else. And I know for Chris and I, our office is always, students that we work with are stopping in all the time. And I'm sure I saw nodding there from a lot of the educators, and hopefully they're the same type or they know people in their building. Kids figure it out, where's that safe place to go where I can talk and not be tied down to all the things in the building. And that's something that I've tried to do, and seen in other teachers as I go through my educational years.
That's interesting, because I as you just said that, I remember I had like a flashback to my high school days of the teachers. I played sports, so a lot of times it was coaches that I knew. I pictured them in my head. So how do you do that, Zach? How do you do that? How do you that's like in my mind, again, this is the athlete in me, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but that almost is like an extra gear. So Zach, how do you do that?
We're fortunate, as it sounds like all of us are, that our employers, our districts have, to some degree, all embraced or recognized the understanding that working from a strengths-based, interest-based approach and working with students with disabilities is critically important. And so, we have these newer mechanisms like pre-employment transition services that are available. What a wise decision, instead of waiting to do this important work whenever a student's walking out of the door, start that work when they're younger. In Louisiana, we're a little bit on the upper end of that range. Students can receive pre-employment transition services when they're 16, and we really are working to move it down. I'd be curious to know, are you able to provide those services when they're 14, 15 in your states? Okay.
Yes.
We're able to do it with other mechanisms or other tools under IDEA, after school programming for middle school students, summer programming for middle and high. That's all connected to community and technical ed, all tied to work-based competencies. And then at the secondary level, we have this community-based vocational training program. Sounds like what you guys have going. So we drive big yellow taxis all around the community, and we have many community partners, but we're only now growing the paid work-based learning experience part of what we do. And COVID really impacted, on the positive side, the interest that community employers have to put our kids to work, because they're so short-staffed everywhere. But going back to where this conversation started, some of the elements of the affective domain and the general work readiness skills that we address with our use of Conover, they're maxed out right now. I mean, some of the needs that our families and students have, for Maslow's hierarchy, for emotional regulation, the most fundamental work readiness skills like showing up in a uniform to be able to go to work. Those have been stressors for our team. But I love that our district has allowed us to assemble a team. I love the place. Our office is now in our district technical school. It's a $20 million facility. The administration is all about inclusion, and our faculty is allowing us to work with periods with students in classes that are highly technical. Some students have a longer ramp to access that material, but more students with significant disabilities are doing so than we ever could have imagined. They're earning industry-based credentials. And then that ties back to the work, the community-based work element.
That's awesome. I want to go, Sully, go ahead. Yeah.
I think, COVID was not a fun period as far as in a lot of people's lives, but it has been great for the special ed kiddos because now businesses are looking for them for employment. And it's just like, why haven't you done this prior to COVID? I mean, it's, Terry and I, we have, I don't know how many Terry has as far as at Hempstead, but I have we have about 775 special ed kiddos in my building. Well, as of right now, I think I have at least half that have paid employment.
Wow.
But I guarantee as far as pre-COVID, I mean, it was probably in the 50, the 50 to, 60 range. But I mean, really those other half that, if they really wanted a job, Terry and I could find them a job out in the community.
Right.
There's no doubt in my mind.
Wow.
So, it's been kind of nice.
So let's push on that because how do you at this moment, right? Because we all see it. We drive around the country. You see now hiring on every building. So how do you lean into those community partnerships because I think part of the reason for employers isn't necessarily, it's just a mindset shift. For example, they put the sign out or they post stuff on Indeed because they want people to come to them. They're not in the, they're not sure of like hey, we got to go out and kind of recruit a little bit. So how do you as an educator, and Marianne too, obviously in that sector too, but how do you connect with those businesses to let them know that this is an opportunity and that, hey, my kids, they can work. I'll teach them, I'll train them up, we'll get them moving. Right. So how do you do that?
Well, the greatest thing that, and I know that we're going to have a segue to technology. What really helps Terry and I is, most of these businesses don't have paper applications anymore. They have online applications. And with Terry and I to have access to 2 job coaches and myself, we can help our population, our special ed population, to fill out applications. And then what businesses are doing now is they are doing online assessments. Well, what we're starting to see is, some of our kids, they think, they're proud. They think they can do the online application and the assessment by themselves. But what's happening is they're doing that online assessment and they are failing it, and then they can't apply to that business for 6 months after. Wow. It's with the technological piece, it's been awesome because we're actually able to help them fill the application out correctly, but also help them to fill out or to complete that assessment so that they're actually able to be one of the yeses in regards to getting an interview.
And then to build on what Chris was saying, the other part of it for the employer, I like the face-to-face or still the communication talking. So what we have as a piece is what's called an informational interview, where we're going to go out and set up a meeting with either that manager or owner just to find out about their business, not talking about kids, not talking about needs. We want to learn about their business, and then just mention to them that there might be a follow-up where we might be able to match some of their needs, as we call the aha moment, that they might be lacking. And we take then a look at students that we're working with and their assessments and see, is there anybody possibly we could match with that employer need, and then try to set up another meeting with them to say, I think I might have a way of matching some of your needs. As Chris said, and then the panelists have said, with COVID, that's become a lot easier because every manager or every business that even we had thought we might not be able to get into are looking for employees.
Awesome.
George, can I say
one
thing
go
about?
Go ahead.
So what we're struggling with we have opportunities and then we have risk. And so the opportunities are we're being engaged in these conversations with some wonderful employers, employers, manufacturing facilities, of, employee owned companies, for career level jobs. And we're having students who have some huge gaps in their general work readiness, and students who cannot pass a drug test, because of smoking marijuana. They'll say, "Hey, can you give me a few weeks? I can get clean." And it's like we're having to look earlier in the pipeline. And fortunately, these companies want to collaborate with us, build some flexibility into their model of training down into the high school level, and identify young people, and then have the young people identify their company as a career path. But that's where our struggles are. We've learned a great deal as we're placing students in a preliminary way into some of these settings, and they're flaming out. Every time somebody flames out, we learn a lesson. But it's fortunate that the HR folks at those companies are ready to work with us, because the general applicants coming in off the street, they're manifesting the same problems, but they're adults. We're sending them 17-year-olds. So that's our generic SPED population. With our more significantly disabled population, we're finding gaps with the connection with adult agencies, because the students are performing disproportionately well in the work environment, but they still are going to have a lifetime of struggle in some of these other domains. They're not going to be able to manage their own money. They're not going to be able to manage their living independence without support. However, we've gotten them to a point where we've identified their interest. We've built them. We've gotten them out in the community. We've found settings where they can achieve success. And now the adult agencies are telling us that the students functioning at too high of a level. So there's a real disconnect with that vocational rehab side, and then the side of disability services for more significantly disabled people. And I think K-12 and IDEA have pushed us kind of ahead of where those agencies are in our community anyway, in our state, in their readiness to say, okay, we'll grant you this young person can work independently, but we're going to bring some of these other services in place to make sure that positive course is sustained.
George, you and I have had many conversations about
Yes,
that.
and
So
thank you. I'm going to piggyback on that same line of concern. Here in Michigan, we have some real issues, and I'm not trying to be the rainmaker in the group, but we've had some real difficulties getting our community partners to IEPs, much less with that connection into the post-high school services piece. So much so where I was concerned about, Lansing's the state capital of Michigan.
Right.
Now we're 20 minutes from, my high school is 20 minutes from Lansing. So I'm from Lansing, and I have no problem going to wherever I have to go to chat.
Yes.
And just to get some answers. And the disconnect appears, and I hate to drag the political ideal into everything else, but it's in every facet of our life, including what we're trying to do for young people with needs.
Right.
And every community partner is important. Every community partner has can serve a separate need for what we're doing for our group, our population of kids. And to, on our end as educators, identify which of those community partners really need to be at those IEPs and really need to be ready to support with some perhaps specific services, we're having a hard time getting that engagement. And I'm finding myself meeting parents and students at one of our big community partners in Michigan is Michigan Rehabilitation Services. That's our
Right.
vocational piece. And I'm meeting the parent, the kid in Lansing at their office to make sure they get in there. Well, and I don't mind doing that. I don't.
Right.
Because if I can help, facilitate that at the end of the day, that's what we want from kids.
Yeah.
And I have a question for the rest of the panel too. Sadly, another barrier I've run into in a lot of my colleagues here in Mid-Michigan, some of our needs students are capable, but get SSI or SSD.
Right.
And I'm running into parents or guardians. They're like, George, we have to slow down on this job thing because that's going to impact that piece. And I've got to hold my tongue because it's like, isn't it about maximizing the potential of this student? And then sadly, those situations I fear bring us into places that we probably shouldn't put our noses, but we're there by default. And how do we want to navigate that, especially if we have students who want to work and perhaps ready, willing, and able employers because of COVID that are willing to work with our kids. So those are just a couple of things that stood out with me when you were outlining. I'm like, oh my God, it happens in Louisiana too.
Yeah, both of those issues.
Hey, Zach and George, for Chris and I, we're fortunate enough, at least here in our district in the state of Iowa, we have voc rehab called the TAP program, Transition Alliance Program. So in our high schools, our TAP counselors, which are funded or paid partially from the state or our district and partially from voc rehab, they're also voc rehab counselors. So they help right away that transition, as you talked about, with the CRPs or adult agencies, to start working with the students as early as 14 years old when they're in 8th grade into high school and help with that transition. And that helps a lot with Chris and I. So not that there still aren't problems at times or miscommunication, but it has helped with that transition. Good. Chris, is there anything else with that, Chris? Or
no?
No.
Hey, Marianne, George had a comment that I want to sit on for a second, and not the specifics of SSI and that, but rather he said something. And George, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to put words in your mouth but like you said a comment about how the student may want to work, but then the parents kind of saying, hey, hold on a little bit. So the best interest obviously is to listen to the student and drive that for, like you said, the long-term value
at the risk of perhaps dismembering the household income.
So how do you, that seems like, and Heather made a comment, which I'm going to, she's an attendee here. She made a comment, but she said that's so hard in all caps. So obviously that hit her right there. She just typed it in. So I guess how do you navigate as we talk about that, but also just parents in general? If we can kind of pivot a little bit. And Marianne, if you can speak to this, how do you bring that? Because sometimes they don't jive, right? Parents and students, there's something. So how do you navigate that? Because that seems like almost, because believe it or not, I went to teacher education classes, and so I did that. That they didn't cover that. It was talking about classroom discipline, and I had to take my praxis exams for history and econ and all that. Great. They didn't cover that. They didn't say the political nature of the house might hit, so how do you do that when you're in the trenches?
Right. I'll just give you a quick update on what I'm doing now, but we're paying kids incentives to get workplace readiness skills. Okay. So the parents came in and we said, we're going to give you $250 for this 2-week program. Your student can earn this amount of money. And then we were told that money had to be counted in their income. So that was going to affect some of the people, put them into a higher bracket, that they might lose some of their benefits. So we had to quickly educate ourselves. And this is what I'm strongly suggesting, is that we as educators educate ourselves and what the rules are for SSI. And then I assure parents that it's dollar for dollar. If they make a certain amount, then they'll get the same amount. You're not going to lose money. but it's a very, very hard concept for them to understand. And then the other part of that is if the student were to lose that job, then getting the funds back become an issue too. They have to go through the whole process again. So that becomes a real problem. But I found out that they do like the money, and it's a big incentive. And for us right now, it's the only incentive. I've got so many kids at risk that are so unmotivated. I've never seen it in my career this severe. They just do not care. They do not see why they need to work. They do not understand. They can sit at home and have money come in. Why do they need to make more money? So it is a real problem, but for me, it's just the education piece. You've got to get to know your parent, get on good terms with them. And then also the other key, going back to what I said originally with the collaboration, you got to know your rehab counselors, your DARS counselors. You got to get to know them. And you do the same thing with them as you do with your students. What are your strengths? And you talk to them about that. And then we work towards that DARS counselor's strengths and how they can help our program. So it's not easy.
Yeah, no, it's not. This is a great conversation. I'm going to keep it rolling. There is a question from Heather. So if I forget, please, you guys remind me. But let's keep on this for a second, because that's one of the things I wanted to talk about was the connection, especially Zach, you mentioned it with pre-ETS. For those of you on that aren't quite sure, pre-ETS is a voc rehab program that is 14 to 21 for in-school youth with disabilities. So it's just wanting to have more I'm paraphrasing, wanting to collaborate more with the schools. So when IDEA is done, whether it's graduation or at 22nd birthday, or for Michigan it's 26, which is the only state in the union, obviously, doing that. But then there's the idea is that there's a seamless segue into, voc rehab services should there be that. So I say all that because that's theory, that's perfection, which we all know doesn't happen. So how do you, Marianne, you mentioned it, get to know your voc rehab counselor, how can an educator do that? Is there a repository of information? Is there speak to that. Anybody can speak to. How do you get to know that voc rehab person at the state to help you all with that student?
Well, every school should have their counselors. So we just reach out to them one by one, and I like really to introduce my student to that counselor, and I want them to know everything they can possibly know about my student. So it's just to get to know them, just invite them to your classroom and stay on top of it too. You can't just say, they can't say, I'll just be back next week. Well, what time next week? And who will you see next week? You have to be specific. So.
Whoa. So wait a minute. So you're saying you guys are salesmen and women too? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I can relate to that. Nice.
Can I comment?
Please.
Briefly.
Zach, yeah.
One of my colleagues just walked in, and I can tell you about the model that we're trying to put in place in Louisiana, and speak to what George is saying as well. It looks like based on what some of the comments are in the chat, that it seems to be across the U.S. So Matt, you can move into so Matt is an employee of our district. Matt Watson. He is a transition program specialist. So he's an employee of our district, but his position is funded by a match from vocational rehab. We have a third-party cooperative arrangement with our state vocational rehab for Matt and another lady who may pop in here, Sabrina, to provide pre-employment transition services. So Matt, George, and all these wonderful people are talking about some of the same challenges we have about benefits at the post-secondary level, parent reluctance to mess up the household income. We also are struggling with some agency coordination. But what is really encouraging is that just by changing the model and having Matt and Sabrina, who have 1 foot in our district, they're paid by the district. but they are on a first name basis with all the VR counselors at the state office. Has been a very important structural change for us. So we're anticipating better results for post-secondary. But this seems to be a national problem with the misalignment of the Social Security Administration's goals and the lack of communication of their incentive programs, because there is a student incentive. So students can earn up to how much money, Matt? Up to $2,800. Yeah, $2,900. Is it a year, a month? It's some significant amount, up to $2,800 in a semester. But the trick is the parent has got to proactively get to a Social Security Administration counselor who is going to accept the call and go on the computer and check the right boxes. Or when that check gets cut dollar for dollar, then any growth shuts down immediately.
Ooh.
The trust is broken between the parent and us, our system, and their belief that the system is looking out for them. So that is something that we need to discuss.
So it's like parental education is kind of what you're saying, to kind of teach them that process to help them
All day long.
Yeah, in many cases the parents are struggling as well with navigating bureaucracy, and so navigating the bureaucracy of the vocational rehab system is one thing, but when you get Social Security Administration involved, the way that it's communicated to us is they are a binary system. You're either receiving or not receiving benefits. There is no nuance there. And in special ed, I think we'd all agree, we live in the land of nuance. We live in the land of growth, a growth mindset. If we don't, we'd be pretty miserable, but we all seem happy in what we do. But I really hope that we can have discussions with our elected officials, with our partners in the state houses and in state government, about the disconnect between an incentive program that encourages work and a bureaucracy that penalizes work. So we're on the incentivizing work bandwagon. But
how do you? What are some Sully? What are some practical steps to take from this? Because that's one thing.
Well,
yeah.
Just to piggyback off of Zach, I have no idea as far as on Terry's side, but the family's biggest concern, as far as that I'm seeing, as far as in Iowa, is the kiddo losing health insurance. It's not so much with how much they're making, because I think in Iowa they can make up to $13,000 a year. I mean,
right.
That's just a number. The parents aren't so concerned about. I mean, they're concerned, but they don't. Their number one concern is losing that health insurance. That's numero uno as far as in our state. It's really hard for myself to convince them, or whether it's our TAP counselor or the guidance counselor, whoever. It's the health insurance that really they shut down big time.
Yeah. So the idea is, if a student has a significant disability or a health impairment that is identified, that is a developmental disability maybe, that will never be cured, why would the system not acknowledge that?
Account for that, yeah.
Yeah, account for that.
Or even threaten it.
Or threaten it. I was going to use that word, threaten.
It doesn't make any sense.
Because there seems to be a lot of animus related to Social Security. There's somehow, somebody's cheating the system, and we're going to catch them when they're cheating. But I think, George, you kind of alluded to this a little, but you didn't say it. It's like I feel insulted sometimes as a professional when we're making recommendations that a student go to the agency, parent go receive the service. It's designed to do X and Y and Z. And then they get shut down. And, every day for the last month, my colleague who's not here has had a crying parent because they got shut down in an interaction because we had essentially done too good of a job to get the student to be independently employed. And that's a failure in the system.
Hey, I'm gonna hold this just to because that was an awesome segue into this question. This is a question from an attendee here, Heather. She goes, so Zach, you just mentioned it, so this is perfect. Talking about you feel insulted being as a professional. She asks, how can teachers stay in education with all the stress and short-staffed departments and schools? How can we combat real burnout? So Terry, can you speak to that a little bit? Because 34 years, I mean, you've had to combat real burnout, I'm sure, but what can you answer that for Heather and others?
Well, for me, maybe this is something that being able to do the job that I do in the district, given that freedom for Chris and I to be able to work with students and have a non-flex schedule that's not tied to the school has helped, and work with employers. But one thing that I've been involved with for 25 years, I have a therapy dog that's trained that I bring to school. We have a brain health room now for students and staff in each high school for these stress type of anxieties from COVID, from home life, from whatever it might be. And for me, one of my connections that I've been able to do is introducing a therapy dog into the school, going for both staff and students in different classrooms and in the hallway and in the brain health room has brought maybe exchanges with students. But for myself as an educator, when you're giving something like that and seeing the interaction that an animal can do, or a staff member, whatever it might be, with individuals, it helps with my stress level. It helps with mine being able to realize we're all part of something and take, the old adage, one day at a time. But this isn't as important as this moment right now when that student is interacting either with us or with an animal. So that's been for me over the last 25 years, being able to do that. As I mentioned before, whether that's that interaction driving a student to a work site, finding out more about them and seeing a part of them that maybe other educators who are in a school setting doesn't see. And then you have to advocate for that student with other professionals in the building, or seeing that gentler side, or that side that I'm sure Marianne has seen a lot in counseling that doesn't always come out in a student, whether it's interacting with an animal or other staff.
Awesome. Marianne, can you speak to that? I mean, you said 50 years, by the way,
Sure.
congratulations. For any latecomers, she said she's been doing this for 5 decades, so kudos.
Yeah, for
That's
me,
awesome.
it's all about self-care too, guys. And I'm learning this in old age, but it's important for me to do the things that I used to enjoy doing that maybe I put on a back shelf. So if you enjoy shopping or reading a book or just taking a little trip, do that. And I highly encourage that. You got to have a support team, and just meeting all of you today has been awesome for me, because now I know I can reach out to you to ask questions, and
Absolutely.
we need that. We need support. I found out the best way to do it is to have lunch with your colleagues. It's huge. Just have lunch. That's all I ask. And you can share stories. You can share experiences. You can share students. Talk about things that you've just said about the family interventions and so forth, and it will help each other. And Conover is all about this, and God bless them, because they've helped me through the years over and over and over again. But they've taught me to work smarter, not harder. And that is key to staying in this profession. You got to find better ways of doing things, and don't be closed-minded. And just support each other. And the number one thing I've learned since I've been with this counseling service is to breathe. Just take a minute and breathe. And just know tomorrow's another day, and always know you can ask for help. There's somebody out there that can help you. So that's my little tidbit of
That's awesome.
information.
Yeah, George, what about you? How do you combat that real burnout? Because again, people are feeling it. I mean, and the other side of it is you read it every day, right? We see all these different
Sure.
publications, social media posts, and viral things and all that. So, how do you
I think it's so
navigate
important
that?
to find some things you really enjoy doing, and then that allow you to de-stress. And
Like you coach, right? Does that help?
yeah,
Obviously,
I retired 2 years ago from coaching, but it did help. When grandchildren came along, that something had to give. So now playing with them has replaced coaching piece. But you've got to do something to de-stress and keep your own mental health. So I think that's important.
Yeah, that's awesome. We had another question from Carrie. She says, "I'm a high school teacher of students with disabilities. I take students out daily during my workplace skills class to local businesses to work."
Nice.
Sounds like a lot like Sully and Terry
Yeah,
there. But
the community
how does
based
your
learning.
schools add or use additional staff to help with that? I'd love to increase the amount of students I can reach. So Sully, if you can speak a little bit to that.
Well, I think, like I said, Terry and I are very thankful that our district gives us access to 2 job coaches. So we are able to take kiddos from school out to whether it's a paid or unpaid work site, and for them to work on their job skills. It's so much easier because Terry in my position prior to 2013 it was just ourselves, and we had to do everything for the 175 kids that I have or 200 that Terry has over at Hempstead. For us to kind of be a 3-headed operation instead of one has helped immensely in regards to reaching out to more kiddos as far as in our building.
So that's awesome. So it sounds like administration had put a priority on that as far as creating resources financially to allow another staff member to be there, right? So without that won't happen. Am I correct in saying that for
right?
Case?
We had a METS grant that came from the state of Iowa back in 2013, where they were seeing deficiencies statewide in regards to post high school outcomes in regards to employment in these special ed kiddos, as far as it sounded like statewide, not district wide. So then this is kind of what we came up with in regards to getting supports for myself and Terry. And now we're able to reach more numbers as far as than us just being by ourselves, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And what Chris kind of mentioned, a lot of the panelists, that word barriers, and that's what the METS project allowed us to do, was what barriers are recognized for students to reach some type of employment goals or get out into the community. And then METS and the district help us, all right, how are we going to solve those goals or those barriers? And they allowed Chris and I to think outside the box, and not be afraid to, as an educator, or give us an outlet that we're not going to either be punished or chastised because we're trying to do something that it wasn't in that norm.
Awesome. And we got like I said, I love the conversation. We got about 5 minutes. I'm going to be cognizant of both the panelists as well as people listening. Time. Question that came through, could earnings be, and this was probably in relationship to the conversation we had earlier, could earnings be socked away in an ABLE savings account? I don't know if you all can speak to that. I can't.
Familiar with what that is.
Okay.
ABLE.
Yes, it can. And what is one good thing that our vocational rehab state level team is doing is they have a wonderful benefits counselor who is on staff there. And so we've engaged her to do some webinars that we can archive that will speak to some of these things. There is a student exemption for employment, and it carries into post-secondary. There is an insurance pathway for people to retain their insurance benefit through employment.
Do you know is that federal or is that state?
There's a state element, but there are federal elements to it as well.
Okay.
But it's the navigation that I think that is so difficult for so many of our families. So more benefits counseling is needed. ABLE accounts were envisioned and as a way for people with especially a developmental disability, to be able to save significant amount in those accounts, and that would not affect benefits. But it's that education factor, the trust factor, the collaboration of the different entities, governmental entities in particular. If we can tighten the coordination there, then all the pieces are in place. We can identify some of the disincentives for success and remove them, improve the coordination, and then things like the student exemption and the ABLE accounts. They do exist, but parents must trust us, and they must see success, or we can't.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's wonderful. All right, so let's take about a minute each of you. I have one last question as we wrap this up, and if we have some time remaining, you guys want to stick on, or other people. But what do you think are the most important skills or skill needed to ensure success in working with students with disabilities? What is like the one thing that in your mind that you have experienced yourself as far as success in working with students with disabilities? Marion, if you want to start, I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, and then we'll kind of roll through the panel here.
Yeah, for me, it's just teaching them to remain positive at the job, at school, seek out help if they need it. Just that personal interaction, again, for me, it's key and can go a long way with it.
Barry.
Soft skills, those soft skills that you look for, and probably out of that, I would say probably getting along with coworkers or the boss or the employer. That's whether it's in school, with their peers or with family members or out in the workforce. It just seems so much that interpersonal, getting along with coworkers and being able to handle different personalities or different ways that bosses or employees communicate to you is a large barrier.
George, what about you?
Patience and perseverance. Building relationships with your students, with your parents, with your colleagues, to understand what you're trying to do for these young people. Getting your young people to understand. And again, I'm reiterating some of the things the panel's already talked about. Getting your soft skills down. Understanding that, and I'm blessed to have a foot, not nearly to the degree that you gentlemen have out in Iowa. I'd love to check that program out. You folks are all doing dynamic stuff, but my family has been in business in the Lansing area for 50 years, and I have been a chance to get to know the business community. And the things that keep coming back: will your students show up? Will they be on time? Will they be drug free? And can they get along with others? We can more or less teach them what we need them to do. We'll work with them.
Right.
The big four that keep coming up in my conversations are that. And that's kind of what drives my curriculum with our work readiness tools in class, with some of our functional skills. And I realize, that all of us are working with different people with different varying levels of ability and disability. And many of my students, I'd say most of my students, may never be able to manage all their own money, but they can learn how to budget. They can learn how to live independently or as independently as possible, and know what options are there, and they can go work and feel better about themselves by being able to do that. So that's kind of the things that I keep in mind.
That was like 13, George. That was like 13 things. I'm just.
Am I over the minute? I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding. No, you're right. No, I love that though. They all tie
together. What we do,
Sure. Sully, go ahead.
I think the biggest, as far as with helping with students is making sure that they are on the career path that they want. Terry and I, we give our, the Conover Mecca to each student every year. And you would think that would be the same results from each year, but it isn't.
Mm.
But what's nice is with what we're doing now in Dubuque is we're able to hopefully, we give that to them their freshman, sophomore year, then try to help them. Okay, you should probably get enrolled in this or that, or this class or that class, so that'll help you as far as post-secondary after they're done. And just, I think the biggest is just the follow through. Hopefully that student does follow through, and hopefully when they are done with high school, they're either getting a job right away or doing some post-secondary education after they are done with high school.
Nice. Zach, yeah, go ahead.
So being relentless, having unconditional positive regard, creating an environment where there's growth, whether technical skills or soft skills, general work readiness skills, and that's what we do. And having a team, we're fortunate, like you guys in Iowa, that we have a team. So our motto is at least one person on the team, and there are about 11 of us. At least one person on the team at any given time has to have that student's back. If the student has been fired 3 times and I'm kind of worn out, somebody's got to step up and say, I've got an idea.
I love that. Yeah, that was my takeaway listening to you all talk was that self-care piece, but also as part of that is the colleagues that you work with are so valuable to your success. That was a common theme I just heard from all of you as Marianne's talking about being propped up and she can give kudos to other people to help her. You, Terry and Sully working together. George, you're talking about your stuff, and then Zach, obviously what you just said. So that's one takeaway I had from you all was just making sure that the people you're working with, you're on the same page and you have that cohesive way to help those kids and the end goal in mind. So any final thoughts as we wrap up from you all? Anything I missed or anything you want to add here before we close? Go ahead, Sully.
I think what's really going to be important are these first year to the third year teachers as far as being able to stay in education, because I don't know if you are seeing it, but we're seeing a lot of our young teachers just can't hack it, and they're finding employment, not even in the education realm. They're going to business, out into the business world or whatever. Most of us that are on this panel, we've been through it before, so we can kind of get through this. But that first to third year teachers, they're really struggling right now, especially after COVID. And I have a very bad feeling that we're going to have a huge teacher shortage in years to come, unfortunately.
Yeah, one thing I've been talking with, and this is more at a personal level, but I've been trying to talk to the old folks, the old vets, right? But somehow have administration support a an actual mentorship, not just say, hey, go seek it out. No, like create it.
Yeah.
Like have someone that's been in the teaching profession for 8+ years work with the 1 through 7s and then create that partnership. Because Chris, to your point, that's what I've been seeing too. So I'm working with my kids' school on that too. They have similar issues here in Wisconsin. So I'm talking with him about this. Because you're right. I mean, if you look at education as a whole, that the writing's on the wall. So we need to find, new ways to innovate and get through that. So, well, this has been wonderful for me. I've learned a lot. I hope you all, the panelists, again, a round of applause. Thank you very much for your time. And you've been gracious to let me hound you to schedule this morning. So I really appreciate that. And again, Marianne or someone said it that you all now are connected. So if you want to bounce ideas or shoot emails, you all are connected that way. But
That'd be great.
all you guys in attendance too that are watching this live or the replay as we do this, we want to create, again, these spaces. So we're going to do more of these. I'd love for your feedback too, to give to me, to say, hey, this was great, or hey, this could be improved, because we're always looking to get better too. But we hope it was worth it this last hour. So thank you so much for your time, all you panelists. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone in attendance. Have a great weekend. Stay warm, stay warm, and we'll see you all soon.
Very good.
Bye
Thank
now.
you.
See you guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Art.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you very much.
Yep.